Prestige Media Group.
What's up, world? My name is Joshua Taylor, aka JTronius, aka Governor of the Galaxy. I'm your man on the New Hustle Report, you dig? Right now, we where the dream began. You know what I'm saying? Sherman, Texas, right in the heart of downtown Sherman. And music chose me, you know. I didn't choose music, music chose me. And this is basically where I fell in love with music from the jump. You know what I'm saying? My father is a singer. My mother played the flute back in the day. Both of my parents deeply in love with all different types of music. So, you know, I was surrounded by it. My mother telling me that she remembers the first time that I busted out singing. I couldn't even really say, you know, I couldn't talk words. I couldn't sing regular words, but I was going to, Diana Ross's On the Radio. And she just remembered me being like, oh, on the radio, just me doing the O's, you know what I'm saying?
Really, nigga? Oh my God!
That was the beginning of it all. You know what I'm saying? Fast forward, as I got a little older, you know, I really was glued into the whole 90s music scene. You know, caught the end of the 80s, was really loving the 80s, but 90s was my special moment, like where I fell deep in love with music. And, you know, Boys to Men, Jodeci, BBD, so forth and so on. And around the time of Dillingham, you know, of course, Sherman is big on sports. And of course, you know, I'm a big man, 6'6", you know what I'm saying? I was always taller than everybody, so everybody really wanted to see me play football. And I was really good. And but in the back of my mind, I always knew that music was my deeper passion. Even back then, I remember I started up a group. Well, even before then, I started writing songs. BBD had came out, and I remember I started at home, you know, jotting down song ideas. Always singing in my house. You know what I'm saying? Watching BET. Like all I wanted to do was watch BET. You know, watch music videos all day. My partners be like, man, that's all you want to do. I was just so entranced by it. I had to study every angle of it, even back then. And then around, you know, the time of Piner, it started getting out a little bit more that, you know, behind closed doors, I was singing and trying to start a group. And three of my partners, me, Donald Moten, my partner Michael Riddick, we formed a group, and I named it Flow. Now, while this is going on, let you know, my classmate, Joanne Parker at the time, he already had started his little rap career. You know, we grew up in the boys club together. And, you know, Joanne at that point in time was already doing shows. We were young. He was doing shows. He was going out of state, you know, recording his album. I was like, man, he could do it. And then I'm looking at everybody on TV. I was like, that's what I'm going to do too. So I messed around and put this group together, and then I named it Flow. And I actually wrote our first song back then called Flow is in the House. I still remember it now, man. I can sing it to you, but I ain't gonna take y'all through that. It's real 90s, you know, New Jack Swing sounding. And that was my first song that I really wrote for my group. And I wanted to practice every day, but these boys was in love with football and just in love with the scene, you know, being young and being popular and all that, man. But even then, dog, I was just a mad scientist. Like, all I could think about day in, day out was making music and making it a reality, making it my full reality. And word had got caught that we were just, on our spare time, we was, singing a cappella like in the hallways or like in the bathrooms or even at our cribs, outside of school. And it caught wind because we all were in the choir too. So our teacher, Miss Morrison at the time, had heard about us doing this. And we were in class one day and she made us sing in front of the class. And the song that we chose at that time was Shy's If I Ever Fall in Love. And so we got up in front of the class, sang in front of everybody in class, and everybody went crazy. It was a crazy feeling, man. And then she gave us an opportunity to sing at a meeting in an auditorium. We had a little, whatever you call it, we had a little meeting in there, a little concert in there, and she let us go ahead and sing. And we got up on stage, and even back then, I was always a dude that could hit them high notes. And we went up there. I remember I had the purple Fila shirt on. We had, the fades and all that straight 90s cross colors, and we got up there and we bust out that song. And from the moment we started singing, the whole junior high just went nuts. And I just remember that next day after we did that, my life had changed. I was still kind of shy back then or whatever. All of a sudden I'm coming into school and girls want to hold my hand and walk through the hallway with me. My partner's dapping me up like, dog, you that dude. And I knew at that moment, I believe I was 13 or 14 years old, I knew that that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. I was like, I wanted to be an artist, I wanted to all rock and roll. Fast forward, I ended up leaving Sherman early. I grew up out here, man. And I ended up leaving for high school. I ended up going to this private school ran by Benedictine monks in Arkansas called Subiaco Academy. And out there I pursued sports and music as well. My freshman year, where we crossed, sports and music were always kind of battling because everybody else, when they saw me, my physical stature and my athleticism, were always having these dreams of me playing pro sports and college sports. And even in my freshman year of high school, they put me in the Arkansas football magazine. I was 6'4", 295, fast on my feet. And I had a lot of colleges interested in me even at that point. And, but I had came back, I had an epiphany. I came back home for the summer. It's kind of like going to college. And so I come home for the summers, kicking with my people here in Sherman. But then I realized even then, I was like, that's all well and good that they got these, these football dreams for me, but I can't, I'm haunted by this music. It took me over. So I kept doing, I literally came back. I had a whole game plan in my head for the future. One of my coaches, which now actually coaches for the Seattle Seahawks, he hit me, he got in the classroom. I spoke to him before we went into class and told him, hey man, I'm not gonna play football no more. I just want to focus on my music. I'm 14 years old. I ain't never been in no studio. I ain't never done no big shows. But I'm like, I'm going to focus on this. So what I'm going to do, I like the way the basketball players, I like their build. So I'm just going to go stick to basketball, get slender, get graceful. So when I get on stage, I look fly for the honeys type thing. You know what I'm saying? So that was my whole mentality. And that really was my game plan. I told him, he just kind of looked at me. He's like, all right, it's your choice, son. But then we both went into the classroom in front of everybody. I'll never forget this. And he was like, you never know what life brings you. All summer long, I've been getting calls about this kid, this big kid. I've been getting calls from different colleges and blah, blah, blah. But he decides that he doesn't want to do it. I'm saying this in front of all my peers. And I'm just looking at him like, I knew, man. Sometimes when God puts something in you and it takes you over, you just, even back then I knew, bro. So I just kind of took it in. And that's what I did. I ended up floating around Arkansas. We got into a little old school barbershop quartet. And I helped name that one too. I was always a visionary with it. So we called this one Basic Elements. Was a barbershop quartet. I started, literally, my music teacher there, Miss Aiken, God bless her. She started taking us around Arkansas all those years I was in high school, from the state fair to literally people's backyards. Like, we sang anywhere that we could, pageants, so I really got accustomed to the stage, and we were doing a lot of harmonies and stuff. So that's kind of like the humble beginnings of where my music began. And then right there towards the end of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't see myself going to college. I literally, even to this day, it's just like music. The moment I get up, music, I'm a nut, man. And I was just like, man, all I know is I just want to do my music. I don't know where to go to school. I did really well. I was like the student body president, had a lot of accolades, was getting awards, but I didn't know what my next move was. And I never forget there was, a lot of musicians, a lot of blues musicians call it a crossroads. And my crossroads was I was lost. And then I remember a monk coming up to me. He was the director of music on our campus at that time. And he was like saying, I had a dream that you were lost in the woods and you didn't know where you were going. So I came in the woods and I helped you come out. And he basically offered me, he was like, if you want to stick around, you don't have to feel pressured to go anywhere. If you want to stay here, basically learn the art of being a monk and learning what he knows about music, I'm more than welcome to stay after I graduate. And I was very deep into my religion, into my faith at that time. So I was like, man, is that God calling me? But in the back of my mind, the rock and roll side of me, this is my response. I told the dude, I was like, say, man, I really thank you for that, but I like women too much. And so that was my answer. And I was conflicted with that for years. I thought I was going to hell for saying that and whatnot. But even in the back of my mind, and he literally looked at me, he's like, man, one day I'm gonna see you in this purple suit coming back here. So he saw the rock and roll in me then too. The monk saw it, even though I got asked to be a monk, man, it's deep. So finally I realized, just randomly, there was just one school that really opened my mind to even entertaining in it. It was like I had a brochure for Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts. I'd never even heard of this place ever. And I just saw that it was like not just a music school, because most music schools are very, very heavy on the jazz side, which I had no experience in, and very heavy on the classical side, which I didn't have hardly any experience either. I was raw talent, maybe going to school choirs and stuff. So I was like, but they told me that, that Berklee wasn't just jazz, it was contemporary music. So you could take classes in all different styles of music and different avenues of music that I had never been hip to. So that's literally, with all these college scholarships on the line with sports, all my academics being all well and good, I didn't pay attention to none of that. I only applied to Berklee and I got accepted. So that was the next chapter, but this is the beginnings of it all. And look, fast forward. Right now y'all see that I'm in the Jazz Museum. I'm not just in the Jazz Museum, I'm in the trumpet room of the Sherman Jazz Museum. Full circle, man. The universe works in full circles, remember that. And the story of Joshua is God told him to play the trumpets before he attacks. So at the end of the day, God told Joshua to have his trumpet players go around the walls of the town and blast their horns and everybody sing at the top of their lungs before he attacks, and they'll make sure that the walls will fall. You think about the science of that. My name's Joshua Sherman. I'm in the trumpet room, and I shall continue to play the music, and the walls will fall. All right, y'all. Part 2 here. Where we left off, I made the decision to go to Boston, Massachusetts, and attend Berklee College of Music. Now, it's funny, man, no matter where I went, even at that point, I was always so proud to be from Sherman, but there was always something in me, no matter where I'm from, where I couldn't sit still. I was a globetrotter. I was always intrigued with the Harlem Globetrotters. I was always intrigued reading those expeditions of, Lewis and Clark, the Moors, all these different people that would go around and travel and explore, and so it was just in my spirit. Like my mama used to say, from the moment he could even walk in a walker, he was trying to run out the door. And that just kind of explains, how I want to go out around the world and really discover my music and discover myself and discover the world, all that, and, just all of that, man. So just think, I went from Sherman, went to a private school in the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas ran by monks, all dudes. Now I'm going to Boston, Massachusetts, to the prestigious and world-renowned Berklee College of Music. Well, you know, a lot of brothers and sisters have been there before me and have been there when I went there. You know, I can name names like, you know, Quincy Jones. John Mayer was my classmate, y'all. And the list goes on and on and on and on about how many people went to Berklee. And my name was amongst all those people. And so I went up there, you know, moved to my first dorm, co-ed dorm, middle of the city, not one, just one glued in campus, but buildings around downtown Boston. That became my new reality. And I began to learn and dig deeper into not just my love for music, but who I was going to become in the music. My first great experience, you know, I could break Boston down into quick segments because, you know, I could go on and on with those stories. But the main ones is my first experience to really get, you know, to work with a bigger artist, like a famous artist. At the time when I first started Berklee, you know, I auditioned for the Berklee Gospel Choir. And believe it or not, even when I was in Sherman, I really didn't have a lot of big background in gospel music. I was kind of self-taught. You know, my mother was Catholic, my father was Southern Baptist, but I lived with my mother. So, you know, most of my church experience was Catholic, which is very different from gospel. So my first real experience in gospel music and a gospel choir was in Boston under Dennis Montgomery, which I still believe is still there at Berklee, teaching gospel music, one of the most killingest musicians I've ever met in my life. And LL Cool J had just came into town right when I got to school. And his people came and checked us out. And then they asked to pick a select few of us to go sing background for him at that time at the Monster Jam in Boston where the Celtics played. I believe, no, it wasn't the Boston Garden, it was right there. It was the Fleet Garden at the time. And so about 6 or 7 of us got chose to go sing background for LL. That was my first huge experience. And when I did that, man, let me tell you, man, they picked us up in these limo vans and we went right backstage. I got the full experience. And not only was us singing background for him, but he was also us in the backstage. So that at that same ticket, it was LL, it was Aaliyah, it was Genuine, Blackstreet, LSG with, you know, Gerald Levert, you know what I'm saying, Aaliyah, you know what I'm saying, Gerald Levert, Keith Sweat, and Johnny Gill, a dude at the time named Uncle Sam, Shaggy was there, I believe Buster was there. It was a big lineup, it was a monster jam, and we were just right there in the mix of it all, man. And I remember going up on that stage. That's the first time I've been in front of that many people, at least 30,000 plus people. And the screams and just the experience, I never experienced screams that loud where it was even hard enough to hear my inner voice. That's the best way I can explain it. Just further confirmation, this is what I need to be doing. God had chose me to do it, so I had to just keep going forward. Fast forward, I entered a group. I auditioned to be in this R&B group because I was always big into the R&B groups. So I messed around and auditioned and I made it. At the same time, shortly after, a friend of mine was the lead singer of this funk band called Soulster. And at the time, I'm still going to college, y'all. Don't get it twisted. Like, I'm still going to school for music. I'm learning music theory. I'm learning all these new things and trying to figure out where my major is going to be. So as I'm doing that, I'm doing all this as well. And I'm just moving and grooving, man. And then my partner, the leader of this funk band, is like, Jay, I'm about to have a baby back in Texas. And they need a lead singer, and they're going to go on tour next summer. Literally my first year of college. And you know, my eyes was like, oh man, but I'm in this R&B group. I just got in this R&B group, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, dog, I got to do this experience. I've never been on tour before. So I went ahead and agreed to going on tour with this group called Soulster. It was a very, underground tour where the bass player was from there. He pretty much set that whole thing up himself. And that was what the game plan was. But in the meanwhile, I had to tell this R&B group, like, hey, I got to go on this tour. And I know they had already had an itinerary for us of what they wanted us to do while in Boston for that summer. So either way, I was going to have to be away from home. So I messed around and told them I was going to take this tour, but when I come back, I'll be in the group. They was like, okay, that's cool. We'll get some substitutes in the meanwhile. Who was my substitute, y'all? was a brother named Lee Wilson. You can look him up. And then the other brother was Ryan Leslie. So Ryan Leslie, some of y'all know him. If you don't know him, look him up. Brilliant, talented musician, brilliant businessman. Till this day, Ryan ain't nothing to mess with. And he was my substitute for my first tour. So when I came back after the tour, I was turned out. We ain't gonna get into all that, but I had lived my rock and roll experience, the ups and downs and all the rounds of being on the road. Beautiful time. Came back to school, and the group had broke up. Egos, you know, if you ever been in a group, man, egos can really blow it away no matter how talented it is. If everybody ain't on the same accord and they not playing team ball, it's gonna fall apart. Groups are tough. And so it already broke down. I was like, oh man. So, but I still was playing with that band. We had got tight at that point. So I still was playing with that band for a while. And then somebody reintroduced me to Ryan Leslie. This was my first independent label experience. They linked me and Ryan up. Ryan liked my drive. Ryan at that point he had graduated from Harvard at 16. So we both were only like freshly 19, 20 when we had met. And he had already graduated from Harvard and was working. He had already had a regular job. And he had already started up his label back then, which was Next Selection. And I soon became a part of Next Selection. That was my first venture. And then at the same time, let me tell y'all, I was grinding, y'all. The same time I linked up with Ryan, I went ahead and got an internship at Universal Records. So I not only was, involved in an independent label at a young age, I also was interning first thing Universal for MCA, for Artist Development Representation, and learning the business. Because the same dude that had told me, hey man, come substitute for me, he pulled me aside one day. He's like, look man, you're talented. You got that naturally. So why don't you focus on something that you don't know and go into business? So that's when I put the business hat on, and I decided at that point that my major was going to be music business. You know what I'm saying? And I fast forwarded, Ryan and I worked a lot. I still didn't know my sound at that point. I knew how to sing a whole bunch of other people's songs, but I didn't know what Josh's sound was. JT, whatever you wanted to call me, I didn't know what it was yet. So while I was with Ryan, eventually, we were floating around. Ryan's game was fierce, man. He at that time he didn't even have a studio. So back then it was floppy disk. So he'd mess around and go in the Guitar Center, and he would put the floppy disk in the keyboards, make his beat at the store. So that's how Ryan, if y'all don't know Ryan, Ryan started making beats with no equipment, little to no equipment. But he always was fly. That brother always was dressing up, man. Eventually me and Ryan parted ways, and right as me and Ryan were parting ways, that's the first time him and my other associate I was with in Next Selection named Corey Williams, he was under Motown as Latif. So it was me, Corey, and Ryan in Next Selection. And Corey had won this contest in New York to open for a lot of big artists in the Apollo. That's the first time I had been to the Apollo Theater in Harlem. And I remember while we were there, Corey won the contest. He got to open for everybody. Destiny's Child, Wyclef, Nelly, Bow Wow, all these people in the Apollo. I remember, and I met all of them. And I never forget going down to the basement of the Apollo. There was Wyclef, and across the way there was Jay-Z. That's the first and only time I had met Jay this whole time. And I wasn't even hip to his music at that point, so I wasn't even intrigued to talk to that brother at the time. I just kind of gave him the what's up nod in the basement of the Apollo Theater. And so that was kind of like my last fizzled out experience with Ryan and Corey. It was kind of my idea that they were really meshing at the time. And we just had, just not that I disrespected the hustle or anything, we just had difference of vibe and different vision, So we parted ways, and then right after I read into the next chapter, big chapter for me in Boston, which was the Three Kings. Three Kings was a group formed by a lot of people based out of Boston with Berkeley musicians. All of us were different places, but all the brothers, but they all had different cultural backgrounds. The Three Kings, the three leaders of the band, was a brother from Jamaica, a brother from the island of Cape Verde, and a brother from Bridgeport, Connecticut. So it was basically a mesh of like world music, hip hop, and reggae. And we hit, and I ended up being like the background singer / hype man for this group. I really vibed with these brothers, and you know, and they were very in their beginning stages, but something gave me that vibe that it was cool. So we messed around, and our little stunt, like, man, it was just a success overnight, man. We just blew Boston up, packing houses left and right, man. And then we started opening. Every time there was a big show in Boston, they were calling us, man. We opened for the Roots. We opened for Talib Kweli. We opened for Busta. We opened for Damian Marley. A lot of reggae greats. We opened for Pharrell at an all-girls college. That was wild. So we were in the mix, and everybody knew we were just going to skyrocket. Once again, egos in groups are a horrible thing, no matter what level you're on. And that was another project that kind of fizzled out early. But the beautiful thing about it was the experience. And in the midst of doing that project, I found my sound. And that's when my solo sound really came into play. Now I was JT and the Dirty Truth. I figured out what it was. From the funk, from all the experiences of all the shows, of the music that I grew up, my influences, here came JT and the Dirty Truth. And while I was in the Three Kings, I started even opening for them. Like, I would do my set, JT and the Dirty Truth, and then I would go on the stage with them afterwards and sing background. So that's how I started my home lane at that point. My first band, when I came out to Boston, I was at the Middle East in Cambridge. And my band at that point, and we reference it now, y'all gonna know some of these names. My first bass player for my first show was Mark Kelly. You know, Mark Kelly now plays for the Roots. My first trumpet player was Christian Scott. Christian Scott is a very well-renowned jazz trumpeter, as we was just in the trumpet room earlier, you know what I'm saying, for under Def Jam Jazz. Mateo Laboriel on guitar, Ricky Lumpkin on keys, my boy, they call him the Real Sing, you know what I'm saying, Mark Robertson was singing background, Rashidra ended up doing really well in the theater world. Man, that band was fully packed, man. Dion on drums. And I went through quite a few band people, but I learned how to put a band together, and I consistently kept doing shows all up and down the East Coast with my band, and just really forming what my sound was. And then I ended up having my daughter. In the midst of kind of the peak of my band, I kind of slowed down because my daughter was on her way, and that kind of slowed down my whole thing. And Three Kings fizzled out. So here I was, my vision, most cats that go to Berkeley, when they leave Berkeley, they tend to go to New York, they go to Atlanta, they go to LA, they go to the music meccas. But I knew that I was about to be a father, and my daughter's mother was from Boston, so I had to wrap my mind around, like, when I get done with school, I'm going to stay in Boston and still try to pursue my music, but I'm going to be a father. And I tell y'all this not as a sad story, I'm just telling you my testimony, because at the time you realize you can get it wherever you want to get it. It's not where you at, it's where you at. And that's really what you got to understand. And so I stayed in Boston, but I still pursued my music. I still kept going off and on to my own pace and learning how to be a father, trying to balance home life with rock and roll life, learning and living and learning that, the ups and downs and all the rounds of that, man. And I did really well in Boston, man. But I was there, till 2014? And I feel like I had hit a glass ceiling. Man, I had worked with all the great hip-hop legends of Boston, shows up and down New York City, studios, videos, I can't even begin to tell y'all, you would lose your mind if I told you all the stories, man. But like, I really did it in Boston. This little country boy from the 903 went out there and really got in the mix and became one of Boston's best known musicians. But I felt like there was something else. I wasn't content with everything, even with all the things that God had let me experience and do. There was more to it. There was another level I had to reach. So at that point, I felt I was burnt out. I felt like I did everything from a hole in the wall to the garden, and I was like, this can't just be it. So a chick from home and me started talking. She started dabbling in music. Her name was April Turner. And April Turner and I started talking. We grew up together as kids, but April really started putting her hands into trying to get into the music business. And she was like, Jay, why, let's try to work together and, consider coming back down to Texas. And I was like, come back to Texas? I don't know. That's it. All right, man. So here I am at the end of my Boston chapter, man, like, okay, I'm gonna give this a try. So, first thing that we compromised on, me and April, that she wanted me to come to Texas, was that she wanted me to get a feel for it. So we agreed to do these shows. The first show she had set up was in Austin, Texas. It was the Juneteenth Festival. And that was fly. First time I ever seen a brother with grills and a do-rag riding a horse through the hood. That was a first for me. I started seeing some of that Houston-style fifth wheel, the slabs type thing, man. I was getting reintroduced to my music culture down here in Texas, basically. And then she also set me up to sing at the House of Blues in Dallas. They had a night where they showcased unsigned artists, and I went out there and got a lot of love out there too. So Texas was showing mad love. It was a new scene, new faces, it felt like a new chapter. It felt right, and I was around people I grew up with, pursuing my dreams still. So it's kind of like a full circle. So I was like, yeah, let me try this. It was tough. I was like, let me try this. And as I was leaving Boston and I moved back to Texas, I had realized that Music Connection magazine, the one that's based in all the guitar centers and whatnot, had picked me as one of the top 100 unsigned artists around the nation of that year, alongside with Lecrae and a couple of other people. I was real honored. Sometimes you feel like your work is going in vain, you're going in circles, but if you keep going, sometimes you're doing a lot more than you give yourself credit for. So that was a good way to leave Boston, knowing that Boston had really helped me find myself as a musician, as a man, as a legacy leaver. Boston has a huge place in my heart always, will always be like another home to me. And I still go up there, of course, my daughter's there. So, me and April started working a little bit. And then, April, she had been here, and we were just having conflict of interest, no disrespect. We just, we parted ways. And then I started working with my cousin Yeezy a lot. And Yeezy was real big into this whole Houston thing. And I had kind of scratched the surface of Houston, but didn't know the history, the sound all the way back. And he was basically telling me, man, Houston, and him and a lot of other people were like, man, if you get Houston, that means you get the rest of Texas. And also the world knows that you're in the building. And I was like, okay, I've been on my international thing, but it can't hurt them. And, let's see what happens. Sure enough, Cuz had done the track for Slide. Charlie had actually shot the video to this jam, and he was telling me, man, this is so Houston right here. If, watch what happens. And I was like, well, do you think so? He was like, yeah, watch. And I went with it, man, and next thing you know, I get this call from the woman herself, Miss Cat TV. Miss Cat said she had heard Slide, she loves Slide. She wanted to put it on a show of hers that she was doing on TV, kind of similar to Music Choice, except for unsigned, independent artists. And because she put Slide on there, and also put a little bit of my story. I was like, yeah, hell yeah. And then after that, she started doing events. She did her first networking event ever. And I went down there just to show love, because she showed me mad love. And I was like, hey man, I'm just here to let you know I see what you're doing. Months later, she did her first music event. And the Playlist Showcase. And at that one, she had a lot of, she had J-Dog, she had H-Town, the R&B group, and a lot of radio reps down there. And she had always had me in the mix. She decided to be my manager not too shortly after that. And we just started doing a lot of stuff around Houston, and she was getting a buzz, a real good buzz with me around Houston, and just helping me stay organized. In the meanwhile, also, my whole mentality at that point in time wasn't just to be focused on Houston. I had kicked it with French Montana a little bit before I left Boston. You know, he'd come into town, he'd give me a call, we kicked it a couple times. And I started watching his grind. And the thing that I admired about French, y'all see where French is now, but at that point in time, he was going for that, and he looked at himself kind of like a free agent, like a sports free, you know, who got the best thing. He was going down to Miami, he was going around to all these cities and just spreading his music and his character, his flavor around everywhere, and people were really picking up on it. And so when I came back home, that was also my mentality. So I was like, okay, Houston is a place I gotta be frequently going to, messing with Cat. I need to go out to LA. I spent some time out in LA for the first time, seeing how I felt about that scene. Constantly going back to the East Coast. And eventually what ended up happening is my mentality was, you know, whoever's gonna sell the scene to me, that's what I need to be a part of. You know, I need to find my new music home. And in the midst of it, you know, I was making some amazing music with Cuz and other producers all around. That's what I've been doing for years. And I get a call. You know, we put Houston, you know, we'll put Houston to the side right now. During the same time with Houston and floating around all these other places, my daughter's godfather calls me. He had recently lived in New York and he had just moved to London. And he told me, he was like, Jay, I'm filling out the music scene out here, and I've met this dude out here that started this app called BRAP, B-R-A-P-P, look it up now. Basically, he was like, man, go ahead and put you up a couple videos on BRAP, and there's nobody on there like you, dog, you're gonna shake the scene. I was like, dig, I'll definitely do that. And I told Kat about it at that time. She was my mentor. I told her, I was like, man, I'm gonna do these things. I literally went out on my backyard. I went to my backyard nighttime, only the porch light on, bugs everywhere. And I recorded my first video on that app. Then I did another one. That first and that second one, man, caused a lot of weight. It did exactly what he said. And people were like, who is this dude? And then I get a hit up from this cat named Maverick Quest out of Manchester, England. And he's like, who are you and what are you doing? Now, I was like, we started getting a story. He's like, say, man, I want to help you make some of the flyest music you've ever made. That was a big statement. Because if y'all know me, man, you know, I'm not cocky and assholeish, but like, I'm very confident in my sound and how I get down. So that was he came to me big dog, and I was like, well, bring it on, Cat Daddy. So we literally, like, and at that point, him and his team, he had a team out there at the time, and they were, you know, gearing up to be an independent label based out of Manchester, England. Fast forward, we start doing records, but we do records in a very 2019 futuristic way where he would send me like drum tracks and like a keyboard track. And then I would call one of my homeboys that I used to play with, you know, or that I knew in Boston. Hey man, call my dude out in DC, Reggie Payne. Hey man, you can play bass on this track. Cool, send me the files, send it out to England. Hey man, you know, my partner died, Miyazaki out in Philly. Hey man, yo, I need you to play guitar on this, man, send me the files. And so I was putting together a band album I always wanted to create, all in my crib. So I literally caught attention from England in my backyard in the 903, you know, okay? So that's going on. That's building up. Houston's building up. And as I can see out of all the places I've been, Houston and London, they were giving me the best opportunities. They were the ones reaching out and really teaming up with me. As we go further into the Houston thing, Kat called me one day and was like, hey man, you know, she's into the film thing too. She's a film director and whatnot. She's going to school for film. And she was like, hey man, I'm involved with this movie called Sunday in Houston. I want to get you in on the acting side, man. And the main character is this Houston rap legend by the name of ESG. And she was really excited. She's like, man, I'll get you in this movie with ESG. Come to the screw shop. I'm like, word. I was trying to be excited with it, but I asked her an honest question. I was like, man, who is ESG? Who is ESG? I had to go back and do my homework before I went down there so I didn't look stupid. So I started, you know, researching the brother's name, going through his catalog, his videos, reading up on his story and the whole SEC and Screw and the whole thing. Sure enough, I pull up, me and Kat pull up to the screw shop and I meet E. and it was a comedy. So I was wearing these wild ass pink glasses, and he was laughing. I had him laughing already, and then we started shooting shots at each other. Wasn't even scripted. We just started making it up as we were going for that particular scene. And he's like, "I like you, man. We gonna work." Fast forward, we go to the studio. Bang Pros, my boy Righteous and them had a studio, and they wanted E to check it out. So ESG came through, and while he's coming into the studio, my anthem's playing, the JTronius. If you hadn't heard it, you know it's epic. So the first thing he hears is JTronius, and he's like, "Who is that?" I'm like, "That's me, bro." Next thing you know, he's like, "Say, man, I need you on my album." And coming out this June 27th, the Southside Still Holding album, I did, one of his most popular songs was G-Ride. And we're gonna release G-Ride 2. So that was the first record I did with ESG. And from there, he had formed this thing called True Republic, which is kind of a branch off the SUC. Since, nobody else can be in the Screwed Up Clique anymore, since Screw died, that was kind of thing how they honored Screw. Now they formed the True Republic. So eventually, I first went on tour with them, and once again, shout out to Cat for all this exposure to H-Town, man. And we messed around and started hitting all throughout Texas, Louisiana. I wasn't even part of it. They had already had that group formed, and I was opening for them. And then eventually they saw how I moved, how I performed, my swag, and eventually they asked me to become one of the first original members of the True Republic. Still to this day, I still am, same as South, And I kind of been dibbling and dabbling at that ever since. At the end of the day, y'all, my journey has been vast, I want to show 903 and beyond that you can chase your dreams from nothing. Like, not that I don't believe in coming from nothing. Everybody comes from something. You know what I'm saying? So my whole thing is that I left this city at 14 years old with music on my mind. Everything else was secondary all my life. Now that I'm a father, that's a little bit different. But you know what I'm saying? I had a dream since I was a kid here in Grayson County. The dream still continues. It's still going. And now I'm a part of Texas, Texas music history really at this point, only being here for 5 years. And now I got the overseas venture, which I'm looking really forward to. And I just want y'all to know to keep striving and that there's multiple lanes. I know a lot of times coming back home, it seems like you can only go one way, it's like, as far as music is concerned, I see a lot of the same thing here. And I need y'all to know that it's important for you to create your own lane, not to follow the masses. I've been doing this for years and years, beating to my own drum. It pays off. And understand that we can always rep the 903. We can rep local, but we think global and beyond. And I just want to be the leader in understanding that we can do that. And there's nothing that we can't do that we can't put our minds to. So understand, at this point, musically, I have no boundaries. I have no genres. I'm the governor of the galaxy, man. I'm a new age funketeer. That's another thing, man. I've been knighted by the grace. I've met a lot of music legends, and I'm on a quest to become one myself. So y'all be on the lookout as I continue to make music, as I continue to rep the 903 like it says on my arm to my leave, as I spread this funky ass soul sound all around all the towns. I'm like Six Flags, y'all. You dig? I'm like Six Flags. I'm planting my flags and I'm putting my music where it wants, where the people accept it, embrace it. The government of the galaxy shall funk on. Love you, 903.
And another one, ladies and gentlemen, presented to you by JTronius. Tossing and I'm turning, trying to figure out good, the bad's, ups and downs, what we're about. Why am I so confused?